Imagine this: the most powerful man in America, the self-proclaimed champion of truth and transparency, the one who claimed he would drain the swamp, now standing on national television dismissing the most explosive scandal of our generation as nothing more than a Democrat hoax. And in that very moment, one of his most loyal soldiers, Marjorie Taylor Greene, yes, the same firebrand who once tied her political survival to his coattails, isn't just disagreeing quietly. She's calling him out, directly, openly, and on one of his favorite networks. This isn't some minor squabble in the background of Washington politics. This is a political earthquake shaking the very foundations of the MAGA movement. Why? Because the Epstein Files are not just another scandal. They are the scandal. They are the ticking time bomb that has terrified America's ruling elite for decades. The whispered names of billionaires, politicians, and celebrities who could lose everything if the truth came out. When Trump calls it a hoax, he's not just downplaying a story. He's protecting himself, whether consciously or subconsciously, from the one issue that could shatter what remains of his credibility. And here comes Greene, MAGA warrior, standing at a podium with Democrats and survivors of Epstein's abuse, saying, "No, Mr. President, this is not a hoax. This is about justice. This is about victims. And this is about holding the powerful accountable, even you, if it comes to that." Can you feel the tension in that? Can you feel the air crackle when Trump's carefully built wall of denial is pierced by someone from within his own fortress? This is not CNN. This is not the Democrats. This is not the fake news media that Trump has spent years training his followers to distrust. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman whose entire career was built on loyalty to the MAGA brand, saying out loud what Trump's base has been too afraid to admit, that if these files come out, Trump himself may not survive politically. This is why the story matters, and this is why you are here right now, watching this video. Because whether you love Trump or hate him, whether you believe Greene is a crusader for justice or just an opportunist carving out her future, one fact is undeniable. This is the first real fracture in the movement that has dominated American politics for nearly a decade. And the question that we are going to unpack in this video, the question that keeps both Democrats and Republicans awake at night, is this: will the Epstein Files be the weapon that finally breaks Donald Trump? Or will his base double down and ignore the truth, no matter how loud it screams? Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear is not just another political fight. It's the opening shot of a war inside the Republican Party itself. To understand why the clash between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene is so explosive, we need to step back and look at what the Epstein Files really are, and why they represent a nightmare for the political establishment on both sides of the aisle. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just some sleazy financier who happened to have a private island. He was the gatekeeper to a world where money, sex, and power collided in the darkest possible way. For decades, whispers circulated about his infamous black book, his flight logs, and the high-profile men who visited his properties. These weren't small-time politicians or minor celebrities. These were presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, royals, CEOs, and Hollywood power players. The Epstein Files, thousands of pages of court documents, testimonies, and unsealed records, hold the potential to expose the full extent of his network, to name names and connect dots that elites have fought desperately to keep hidden. That's why survivors of Epstein's abuse and their advocates are demanding full disclosure. It's not just about Epstein. He's dead. It's about accountability for the people who enabled him, protected him, and allegedly participated in crimes against minors. Think about that for a second. If these files confirm even half of what is rumored, careers will end overnight, reputations will be destroyed, and some of the most untouchable figures in the world could find themselves facing the justice system. Now, why does this terrify Donald Trump in particular? Because his name appears in Epstein's orbit more than once. He partied with Epstein. He was photographed with him. And while Trump has denied involvement in anything illegal, the fact remains. His name shows up in flight logs and social circles tied to Epstein's empire. And when you are running on a platform of being the one who will expose the deep state, the last thing you want is your own fingerprints anywhere near one of the darkest scandals in modern history. That is why, when Trump dismisses this as a Democrat hoax, it isn't just political spin, it's self-preservation. But here's the kicker. The Epstein Files are not partisan. Survivors don't care if the names belong to Republicans or Democrats. They just want justice. And that's what makes Greene's stance so powerful. By standing with survivors and saying this is not a hoax, she's not just breaking with Trump, she's aligning herself with the raw truth of a scandal that transcends party lines. In the broader picture, the Epstein Files symbolize something Americans rarely see: the possibility of real accountability for the ultra-rich and ultra-powerful. And that's why this issue refuses to die. no matter how many times Trump or anyone else tries to bury it. It's not about politics. It's about whether justice can reach the top 1% or whether the system is too rigged to ever touch them. When Donald Trump finally addressed the Epstein Files publicly, his words were less a confident dismissal and more a chaotic stream of consciousness that revealed just how rattled he truly is. Standing in front of cameras, he called the entire issue a Democrat hoax, comparing it bizarrely to the Kennedy assassination investigations, as if equating survivors of sexual abuse with conspiracy theorists would somehow diffuse the outrage. He insisted that thousands of pages had already been released, though he offered no specifics, and then, in typical Trump fashion, veered wildly off topic, rambling about Washington, D.C. being a safe zone where you could walk down the street without crime. Statements so detached from reality that even his staunchest defenders struggled to follow his train of thought. What we saw in that moment wasn't the calculated political strategist who could control a narrative, but a man whose mind seemed scattered, whose words betrayed a fear he couldn't quite mask. Think about it. Trump has built his entire brand on dominating the news cycle, on framing every scandal as an attack orchestrated by his enemies. But with the Epstein Files, he has no safe escape route. He can't scream fake news because the court documents are real. He can't shift blame to Democrats because the names implicated span both parties. And he can't simply ignore it because survivors and their allies, now joined by figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene, are pushing this story harder than ever before. His performance in that interview wasn't just weak, it was disjointed, defensive, and almost panicked. For years, Trump has projected strength, a sense that nothing could stick to him no matter how scandalous. But here, his voice cracked under the weight of what he couldn't control. He wanted to appear dismissive, but his inability to stay on message gave away his true state of mind. Confusion, distraction, maybe even fear. If Trump truly believed the Epstein Files were harmless, if he really thought there was nothing in them that could hurt him, he would have leaned into the moment, demanded full release, and turned the scandal into a weapon against his rivals. But he didn't. Instead, he called it a hoax and stumbled into incoherent tangents, the body language of a man cornered by his own past. For his followers, it was just another classic Trump rant, but for those paying attention, it was a crack in the armor, evidence that this issue touches a nerve deeper than most, and it's precisely that vulnerability that Marjorie Taylor Greene has seized upon. Because if Trump is this defensive, this unable to stay focused, then maybe, just maybe, the Epstein Files are his Achilles heel. Marjorie Taylor Greene's response to Trump's Democrat hoax dismissal was nothing short of a calculated masterstroke, the kind of bold move that signals not just independence but ambition, and it sent shockwaves through the political landscape because Greene has built her entire identity as one of Trump's most loyal defenders, someone who proudly wore the MAGA badge even when other Republicans tried to distance themselves after January 6th. So for her to openly challenge Trump on one of his favorite networks is an extraordinary shift. Standing alongside survivors and even Democrats, Greene didn't just reject Trump's framing, she dismantled it piece by piece, reminding viewers that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted pedophile, that victims are real human beings, and that calling their pain a hoax is an insult to justice. She went further, pushing Trump directly. If it's a hoax, then prove it. Release the files and let us decide. That line alone was devastating because it turned Trump's favorite tactic, demanding transparency from his enemies, back against him, exposing the hypocrisy of a man who once promised to drain the swamp, but now looks like he's protecting it. Politically, this move serves Greene in multiple ways. It positions her as a truth teller willing to stand with victims no matter what. It distances her from Trump's growing weaknesses, and it signals to the MAGA base that she might be the heir apparent when Trump inevitably fades, whether through age, legal troubles, or political defeat. Even her emotional framing, calling out the real hostile act as Epstein's abuse, not Republican efforts to release the files, was shrewd because it reframed the entire debate away from party loyalty and toward morality, a ground where Trump cannot comfortably stand. Make no mistake, Greene is not abandoning MAGA. In fact, she doubled down on her identity as a fighter for Trump's original vision, painting herself as more authentically committed to the cause than Trump himself, who she subtly implied is now compromised. That's why analysts are calling this one of the smartest political maneuvers of her career. It's a wedge issue that Trump cannot easily counter, because if he pushes back, he looks like he's defending Epstein or hiding something. And if he stays quiet, Greene owns the narrative and strengthens her credibility. For years, Trump has enjoyed almost unquestioned loyalty from his base, but Greene has cracked the door open for others to challenge him from within, and that is a dangerous precedent for his dominance. In that moment, with her fiery words and her willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder with survivors, Greene wasn't just rebuking Trump. She was auditioning for the role of leader of the post-Trump MAGA movement, moment. And whether you love her or hate her, you have to admit, politically, it was brilliant. The fallout from this clash between Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene goes far beyond a single press conference or a fiery soundbite. It strikes at the heart of Trump's political base and threatens to reshape the future of the Republican Party itself. Because for nearly a decade, Trump's supporters have operated in near total lockstep with him, defending every controversy, dismissing every allegation, and treating his word as gospel. But Greene's pushback on the Epstein Files has cracked that unity, creating the first visible fracture in the MAGA coalition. For the base, this creates an uncomfortable dilemma. Do they side with Trump, the man they've elevated as the voice of their movement, or with Greene, the woman who has stood beside them in the trenches, championing their causes when other Republicans abandoned them? Many hardcore Trump loyalists will, of course, stick with him no matter what. But the genius of Greene's move is that she's speaking directly to the subset of MAGA voters who care about justice, corruption, and accountability, the ones who first rallied to Trump's "drain the swamp" message. And for those voters, Greene's position makes more sense than Trump's dismissal. If Trump looks like he's hiding something, like he's protecting the very elites he once promised to expose, then Greene suddenly becomes the one who's more in line with the original spirit of the movement. And that could siphon off crucial support if Trump falters. Within the Republican Party, the dynamic is even more volatile. Establishment Republicans have long wished for someone who could weaken Trump's iron grip on the base without alienating them entirely, and Greene may have just demonstrated a path to do exactly that by aligning herself with survivors and framing the issue as moral rather than partisan. She makes it harder for Republicans to dismiss her without looking like they're complicit in covering up abuse, and that puts immense pressure on other GOP figures who might be tempted to follow her lead. The danger for Trump is not just that he loses voters in the short term, but that he loses his aura of inevitability, that sense that he is the only one who can lead the party. And once that aura cracks, challengers multiply. Already, figures like Lauren Boebert are echoing Greene's calls for transparency, and if more Republicans join in, Trump could find himself isolated, forced into a defensive posture he has rarely had to adopt. The Epstein Files, then, aren't just a legal or moral scandal. They're a political litmus test for the GOP, one that could determine whether the party remains bound to Trump's personal brand or begins to splinter into factions, with Greene and others carving out space as alternative leaders. For a man who thrives on dominance and loyalty, that prospect is catastrophic. And for the Republican Party, it raises a haunting question. Are they watching the beginning of the end of Trump's reign, or the start of an even messier civil war within their ranks? So, here we are, at the end of this deep dive, and the question isn't just about Trump, or Greene, or even the Republican Party. It's about us, the people who are watching this story unfold in real time, because what the Epstein Files represent is bigger than politics, bigger than party loyalty, bigger than red versus blue. They represent a test of whether America is willing to face the darkest truths about how power operates, and whether survivors of horrific abuse will finally see justice instead of cover-ups. Donald Trump says it's a hoax, but if that's true, why not release everything and let the American people judge for themselves? Marjorie Taylor Greene says it's not a hoax, that the victims are real, that Epstein was a convicted pedophile, and that the true hostile act was the abuse itself, not the calls for transparency. So, where do you stand? Do you believe Trump is protecting himself? Do you believe Greene is positioning herself as the heir to MAGA? Or do you believe the entire political establishment is terrified of these files because they contain names too powerful to be exposed? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me, should the Epstein Files be released in full, with no redactions, no protections, no shielding of the elite? Your voice matters, because this is not just a story happening in Washington. This is a moment that could change the future of accountability in America. And if you've made it this far in the video, clearly you care about the truth getting out. So do me a favor, hit that like button so more people see this story. Share this video with your friends and family so the conversation spreads. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel, because we are not going to let this issue disappear the way so many scandals have been buried before. Every week, we'll keep shining a light on the stories the powerful want you to forget. We'll keep amplifying the voices of survivors, and we'll keep asking the hard questions that others are too afraid to ask. Because whether it's Trump, Greene, the Republican Party, or the Democratic establishment, no one should be above accountability. Together, by staying informed and demanding answers, we can make sure that justice isn't just a word tossed around in political speeches, but something real, something tangible, something that finally reaches the very top. So don't just watch, get involved, join the movement, and let's make sure the Epstein Files are not another chapter of silence, but the beginning of truth.